I feel bad for JD Vance because now he's gonna have to change his name.
That was Trevor Noah absolutely shredding JD Vance, and let's just say Vance is not taking it well. In the past few days, the VP has become the butt of the joke, all thanks to Trump's disastrous meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Memes like this and this have flooded the internet, turning Vance into a walking punchline, and now he's completely melting down. In this video, we're breaking down his chaotic reaction, the backlash he's facing, and how he ended up at the center of all this criticism. JD Vance gets roasted. In recent days, Vice President JD Vance has been getting torched from all sides. His latest misstep, insulting one of America's closest allies. While discussing the proposed European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, Vance dismissed the UK's military contributions, calling them 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. That remark did not go unnoticed. British officials and veterans were quick to fire back, calling his comments deeply disrespectful and historically ignorant, especially given that British forces fought alongside the US in Iraq and Afghanistan, losing hundreds of troops in the process. And that was just the beginning of Vance's very bad week. His tensions with Ukraine's leadership have only made things worse, fueling concerns that he and Trump are abandoning key allies at a critical moment. And just when he thought he could catch a break, the internet had other plans. An old clip from The Daily Show resurfaced, reminding everyone that this isn't Vance's first public humiliation. The clip, originally from May 2022, shows Trevor Noah roasting him over Trump's infamous gaffe, where the former president couldn't even remember his own endorsement, mistakenly calling him JP Mandel instead of JD Vance.
I feel bad for JD Vance because now he's gonna have to change his name to JD Mandel.
At the time, it was just a light-hearted joke about Trump's lack of loyalty and memory when it came to his own endorsed candidates. But now, as Vance faces heavy scrutiny, the resurfaced clip is being used as yet another example of how he's been publicly humiliated, both then and now. But that's not all. Even his ski trip in Vermont turned into a PR disaster. While he was out on the slopes, someone in the crowd took the opportunity to call him out, right in real time.
JD, how does it feel being Putin's puppet?
So, how did Vance end up at the center of all this criticism? It all traces back to Trump and Zelensky meeting. In early March, Trump and Zelensky sat down for what was supposed to be a high-stakes negotiation. The US aimed to secure a highly favorable deal with Ukraine, while Zelensky sought to lock in a crucial security guarantee. On paper, it had the potential to be a diplomatic win for both sides. But instead of a moment of mutual victory, the meeting quickly spiraled into a heated confrontation. However, the meeting between the two leaders didn't take a bad turn right away. It was only when Vice President JD Vance, with a carefully calculated tone, told President Zelensky that under Trump, the United States was pursuing diplomacy with Russia that the tension in the room rose. Why? Well, on February 12th, Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin, seemingly kickstarting peace talks without involving Ukraine. Naturally, this move didn't sit well in Kyiv or across European capitals. In response, Zelensky and European allies pressed Trump to offer security guarantees for any potential truce, stressing the importance of consequences if either side failed to uphold the agreement. However, Trump remained non-committal and doubled down by saying that Putin respects him enough to not break any deal. That didn't sit right with Zelensky, as he firmly believed Russia could not be trusted to keep its promises. He interrupted Vance, firmly reminding him that diplomacy with Putin was impossible. He recalled how, back in 2019, he, President Macron, and former German Chancellor Merkel had signed a ceasefire with Putin. At the time, everyone assured him that Russia would respect the agreement, but that never happened. Instead, Putin continued his assault on Ukraine, claiming the lives of innocent civilians. Zelensky went on, recalling how Ukraine had released captured Russian prisoners as part of the deal, yet Putin never returned the Ukrainians he had taken. His frustration was evident as he turned back to Vance.
But after that, he broke this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
At that moment, JD Vance's tone stiffened. He seemed caught off guard by Zelensky's pushback, perhaps not expecting such a direct challenge to his idea. Growing more defensive, he responded with this.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Zelensky, not backing down, asked Vance if he had even been to Ukraine. Vance replied that he had actually watched and seen the stories, and he knows what happens. He accused Ukraine of bringing people on a propaganda tour. Vance's aggressive approach didn't sit well with many, who felt it soured the entire meeting. As J.D. Vance pressed on with pointed questions, the tension in the room thickened. Zelensky, growing visibly frustrated, warned that the US's reluctance to support Ukraine against Russia wouldn't go unnoticed. It could come back to haunt them. This infuriated Trump.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
What followed was a complete breakdown of the discussion. Tensions escalated as Trump repeatedly emphasized that Zelensky was not in a strong negotiating position. Each time Zelensky attempted to make his case, he was interrupted. Zelensky, maintaining his composure but remaining firm, acknowledged the severity of the situation. He reminded everyone that Ukraine had been standing strong and fighting on its own since the war began. He also clarified that while he had expressed gratitude for US support, he had done so privately in cabinet meetings rather than in public. But the moment Zelensky said Ukraine had been fighting alone, something about that seemed to strike a nerve with Trump. He immediately fired back with a response that was classic Trump.
You haven't
In
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You haven't been
not only
alone.
in this
We
cabinet.
gave you,
I
you
said,
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment.
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
Trump took it a step further, making it clear that doing business under these conditions wouldn't be easy. Zelensky attempted to de-escalate, thanking the American people and government, but Trump wasn't letting it go. He kept hammering home the point: Ukraine didn't stand a chance without US support. The tension escalated again when Trump pointed out that Ukraine was running low on soldiers and pushed for a ceasefire, arguing it would be the smartest move to stop the bloodshed and preserve what remained of Ukraine's forces. Zelensky, while agreeing that Ukraine wanted peace, stressed that any ceasefire had to come with solid guarantees to ensure Russia wouldn't just regroup and strike again. But Trump wasn't interested in a drawn-out negotiation. He insisted a ceasefire could happen much faster than a full peace deal, and seemed irritated that Zelensky wasn't immediately on board. Afterward, Trump gave a very clear warning to the Ukrainian president.
But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out.
Trump's stance on this wasn't exactly surprising, given how vocal and consistent he's been about the US role in providing security guarantees to Ukraine. He's repeatedly made it clear that he doesn't see the United States as the primary player in this situation. In fact, he's openly stated, "I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that." That statement sums up his position perfectly. He believes Europe should take the lead in supporting Ukraine, rather than the US stepping in as the main guarantor of security. It's a stance that has sparked plenty of debate, especially considering the high stakes of the conflict and Ukraine's dependence on international support. For Trump, it's about shifting responsibility to Europe, but for others, it raises bigger questions about America's role in global stability. And when it comes to Ukraine joining NATO, Trump has been just as blunt. Asked about it, he responded, "NATO, you can forget about it." I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started. The meeting concluded with Trump effectively asking Zelensky to leave, a moment that sent ripples across the globe. Many European leaders reacted with disappointment, viewing it as a blatant show of disrespect toward a key US ally, especially in front of Russia, the very nation that has devastated Ukraine and claimed countless lives. The fallout from the meeting was swift and brutal, with both J.D. Vance and Trump facing heavy criticism for acting like Putin's puppets. Vance, in particular, tried to project strength, but with memes like this circulating online, it was clear the internet wasn't buying it. Beyond the public backlash, the fallout had real-world consequences. The Trump administration moved to suspend all US military aid to Ukraine, freezing billions of dollars in critical shipments. This decision effectively cut off deliveries of ammunition, vehicles, and other essential equipment, including supplies that had already been approved under Joe Biden's presidency. And for Ukraine, the cost of this decision could be devastating. The costly blow to Ukraine. One of the biggest reasons J.D. Vance and Trump are facing backlash is the sheer cost of the meeting's fallout, not just for the US, but for Ukraine. The consequences of their decisions could severely weaken Ukraine's position while giving Russia a clear upper hand. As soon as the meeting ended, Russian officials wasted no time capitalizing on the chaos. They seized the moment as a propaganda victory, painting the tense exchange between Zelensky and Trump as a historic turning point. Some even went as far as calling it a livid reprimand from the Oval Office. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova took it even further, mocking the situation by claiming that Trump had shown restraint by not physically assaulting Zelensky during their shouting match at the White House. I think Zelensky's biggest lie of all his lies was his assertion in the White House that the Kiev regime in 2022 was alone, without support, she wrote on Telegram. She went on to say how Trump and Vance held back from hitting that scumbag is a miracle of restraint. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now deputy head of Russia's Security Council, joined in, launching a crude attack on Zelensky. He called him an insolent pig who had received a proper slapdown in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, Kirill Dmitriev, head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, described the fiery confrontation between Trump and Zelensky as historic. Dmitriev, who was one of Moscow's negotiators in the Russian-American talks in Saudi Arabia back in February 2022, made it clear that Russia saw the spectacle as a turning point. Analysts believe that this meeting has weakened Ukraine's position globally, given Russia an advantage, disrupted Western alliances, and created risky new precedents for world security. A major concern emerging from the meeting is the potential halt of US military aid to Ukraine. For years, American weapons, ranging from Javelin missiles to artillery shells, have been crucial for Ukrainian forces battling a larger, better-equipped Russian military. However, Trump's unwillingness to support Zelensky during their meeting, along with his insistence that Europe should take on more responsibility, has sparked fears that the US could drastically cut or even stop these weapons shipments. Michael Kaufman, a military analyst at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, estimates that Ukraine has enough supplies to sustain its current pace of fighting until the summer, but without US support, Kyiv would quickly run out of ammunition and lose access to some of its most advanced weaponry. And this isn't just about bullets. Ukraine depends on American air defense systems, drones, and intelligence sharing to keep its defenses strong. Since Russia's initial invasion in 2014, the US has provided approximately $69.2 billion in military aid to Ukraine. This figure surged after the full-scale invasion in 2022, with an additional $65.9 billion in support. Through the Emergency Presidential Drawdown Authority, the US has tapped into Pentagon stockpiles 55 times since August 2021, sending Ukraine roughly $27.7 billion worth of military assistance. This aid includes a wide range of weaponry, advanced air defense systems like Patriot batteries, NASAMS, and Hawk systems, along with thousands of Stinger and AIM anti-aircraft missiles. The US has also supplied Ukraine with over 40 HIMARS systems, hundreds of howitzers, millions of artillery rounds, and armored vehicles such as Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles. Additionally, American support has covered anti-armor weapons, small arms, maritime defenses, and cutting-edge surveillance technology, giving Ukraine a critical edge in multiple areas of the battlefield. But all of that may soon change. After the tense meeting, President Zelensky spoke to Fox News, acknowledging that without US support, Ukraine would struggle to resist Russian advances. Despite the uncertainty, he remained hopeful that the strained relationship between Kyiv and Washington could be repaired. He also expressed his wish for Trump to take a stronger stand with Ukraine, though that remains far from certain. Since returning to office, Trump has criticized Zelensky, arguing that he should have made a deal with Putin to avoid the conflict in the first place. One thing is clear: Ukraine needs US support to keep fighting, and losing it would be a devastating blow. From Trump's recent actions, it seems he wants Europe to take more responsibility rather than relying on the US to shoulder the burden. European leaders have pledged to step up their military aid, but the reality is far more complicated. Many European countries are already stretched thin, and scaling up their weapons production to match US levels would take years, time that Ukraine simply doesn't have. After his meeting with Ukraine's president, Trump revealed that his administration had engaged in very serious discussions with Russia about the ongoing war. He hinted that he and Russian President Vladimir Putin might soon take a major step toward ending the prolonged conflict. "We will be speaking, and I think we'll perhaps do something significant. We want to end that war. That war would not have started if I was president," Trump stated. However, critics argue that this is just another empty promise, and they might have a point. Trump has repeatedly claimed on the campaign trail that he could end the Ukraine war quickly, sometimes boasting that he could do it in just 24 hours. But there's one inconvenient fact he tends to overlook. When he was in office, fighting in eastern Ukraine was already escalating between Kyiv's forces and Moscow-backed separatists. exists long before Putin launched a full-scale invasion in 2022. Ending a war isn't as simple as striking a deal between two leaders. Russia has entrenched strategic goals in Ukraine, and Kyiv has made it clear that it won't surrender its territory. Any negotiation would require significant compromises, and so far, neither side has shown much willingness to back down. If Trump does push for a peace deal, it could mean pressuring Ukraine into accepting terms that favor Russia, something that would spark controversy both within Ukraine and among its Western allies. His relationship with Putin could be a factor, but that might just as easily work against him. If he's perceived as being too friendly with Moscow, it could weaken US influence in Europe and make Ukraine and its allies uneasy. Beyond that, Trump wouldn't have the final say. Congress, military leaders, and international partners all play a role in shaping US policy on Ukraine, meaning any attempt to broker peace would face significant political and diplomatic hurdles, or maybe not, since he just abruptly stopped Ukraine aid. But while Trump appears to be backing off, other world leaders are making it clear they stand with Zelensky. European leaders continue to stand by Ukraine. After Zelensky's tense meeting with Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky found a much friendlier reception in London. On March 1, 2025, he met with British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at 10 Downing Street, where the two leaders shared a warm embrace. It was a sharp contrast to Trump's treatment of Zelensky just a day earlier. Instead of showing solidarity, Trump had mocked Zelensky's outfit, an odd focus given the gravity of their discussion. Starmer, however, took a different approach, making it clear where Britain stood in supporting Ukraine. Democratic lawmakers wasted no time in slamming what they saw as an appalling meeting between Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, didn't mince words, calling the spectacle a disgraceful and downright un-American display. She accused Trump of siding with a murderous thug, Putin, over our democratic ally, Ukraine, making it clear where she believed Trump's loyalties lay. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland was just as blunt, calling the Oval Office meeting beyond disgraceful. He captured the outrage felt by many who saw Trump's treatment of Zelensky not just as disrespectful, but as a serious blow to US-Ukraine relations. His criticism was echoed by Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, who took things a step further, insisting that the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky deserve an apology. Durbin didn't stop there. He directly accused Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance of berating Zelensky and putting on a performance so full of lies and misinformation that it would make Putin blush. Durbin's cutting remarks painted a damning picture of the meeting, suggesting that Trump and Vance's behavior wasn't just embarrassing for the US, it was a betrayal of one of its closest allies. And if there was any doubt about how damaging the incident was, Durbin drove the point home with one final jab. They're popping champagne in the Kremlin. His words underscored the wider consequences of the meeting, making it clear that its fallout extended far beyond Washington. Meanwhile, across the Channel, French President Emmanuel Macron stepped in to ease tensions following the Trump-Zelensky clash. He urged both leaders to bring back some level of respect and diplomacy to the conversation. But Macron wasn't just focused on smoothing things over. He also raised a bigger issue: Europe's reliance on the US for defense. He proposed a serious discussion about a European nuclear deterrent, suggesting that France, as the EU's only nuclear power, might need to take on a bigger role in protecting the continent. With shifting alliances and growing uncertainty about America's commitment, Macron seemed to be signaling that Europe should start preparing for a future where it stands more on its own. Joining the wave of support, European Union leaders Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa assured Zelensky that he was never alone. In a joint statement shared on social media, the European Commission and Council presidents encouraged him to be strong, be brave, be fearless, while reaffirming their commitment to working with Ukraine toward a just and lasting peace. Meanwhile, the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, took it a step further by openly questioning the United States leadership. She didn't hold back, stating, "Today, it became clear that the free world needs a new leader. It's up to us, Europeans, to take this challenge." With growing concerns over Trump's friendly stance toward Putin, it's no surprise that European nations are moving swiftly to reinforce their support for Ukraine. This brings up a major question. Why can't NATO nations just come together and fully support Ukraine? Well, here's why. Impact of NATO in the war. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, NATO has played a critical role in shaping the war's trajectory. While Ukraine is not a NATO member, the alliance has provided extensive military aid, intelligence support, and strategic training to help Kyiv resist Russian advances. One of NATO's biggest contributions has been modernizing Ukraine's armed forces, moving them away from outdated Soviet-era tactics and integrating more advanced Western military strategies. This shift has made Ukrainian forces more adaptable, better coordinated, and more effective effective in battle. Beyond training and modernization, NATO members have supplied Ukraine with billions of dollars in advanced weaponry. The US alone has provided tanks, long-range artillery, and air defense systems, while European countries have contributed Leopard tanks, Iris-T air defense systems, and a steady flow of ammunition. The European Sky Shield Initiative, SI, launched in 2022, has also played a role in strengthening Europe's collective air defense, benefiting Ukraine in the process. These coordinated efforts have been crucial in helping Ukraine resist Russian offensives, reclaim occupied territories, and disrupt Moscow's military operations. However, despite NATO's contributions, the alliance has struggled to act as a fully united front when it comes to Ukraine. Political divisions among member states have created hesitation over sending certain types of advanced weaponry, fearing it could escalate tensions with Russia and potentially draw NATO directly into the conflict. Countries like Germany and France have at times been more cautious about ramping up military aid, while nations closer to Russia, such as Poland and the Baltic states, have been far more aggressive in pushing for stronger support. One major concern is that if NATO as a whole were to intervene in a unified, unrestricted manner, it could actually prolong the war rather than bring it to an end. Russia has repeatedly framed its invasion as a fight against NATO expansion, and a more direct NATO role could reinforce Moscow's narrative, giving the Kremlin justification to escalate further. A fully united NATO effort might also remove incentives for negotiations, as Ukraine would feel more confident in its military strength, while Russia would dig in harder, unwilling to concede under heightened Western pressure. Ultimately, while NATO's involvement has been essential for Ukraine's survival, the alliance remains in a delicate balancing act. Too little support could weaken Ukraine's defense, but too much unity and aggression could turn the war into an even longer and more dangerous conflict. As the war continues, the big question is whether NATO can keep supporting Ukraine without making things worse, or if disagreements within the alliance will change the course of the conflict. One thing's for sure, whatever happens next won't just affect Ukraine, but the future of Europe as well. And that's a wrap. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out these ones on your screen. You might enjoy them too.